Welcome back to Inside the Well Space, where we have real conversations about our health and wellness, especially for women who, as we know, have been overlooked by the medical world. If you've been listening, you know that this space was created because I believe deeply that women are underserved when it comes to both our medical and our mental health needs. This is a fact. Today, I'm not bringing on one of our wonderful guests that we've had. I'm actually going to talk about something personal because it's something that I worked with for years and years and years. And this is something that I'll plan to do from time to time when there's a topic that hits close to home or it aligns with the work I've done personally and professionally. These solo episodes are about the softer, non-medical issues. I'm not a doctor. I'm a social worker. I also run a beauty company. It focuses on issues that so many of us women silently struggle with, and they're things that we don't always have the language for. We certainly don't talk about it, but we're feeling it deeply every single day. And my goal is to help make those things more clear to all of us with definitions, with data, and with stories to put a framework around them so you know that A, you're not alone, and B, you're absolutely not crazy because it's real. So today, our topic is relationship abuse. And it's not the kind of abuse that leaves bruises, which is the stuff that we all think about and we consider abuse, but it's the subtle, emotional, psychological forms that slowly erode your sense of self. You know, with everything that's been happening in the news these days with P. Diddy trial and the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, where we saw everything that actually was real and happened to these women, I felt compelled to just educate people right now with some words so that we can all familiarize ourselves with something that's called coercive control. So let's step in to Inside the Well Space. So you know that the purpose of what we're doing here is education. That's all it is education about so many things. And obviously our health and wellness is what we're focusing on because there are so many tidbits of information that we all need to know. So we've had these wonderful, smart, phenomenal women come on and talk about specific things like, heart disease that kills us, breast cancer that's like ravaging us, mental illness, et cetera, et cetera. And there's so much more that's coming. Today, the work that I've done over years, I'm in the beauty industry, which I've been in and still am in for years. I make, non-toxic skincare, among other things. But I also am a social worker. And I did years and years of work with women in a variety of capacities around the relationship abuse. I mentioned before that what went on in the trial that we recently saw, that everybody, you couldn't not see it, what went on with P. Diddy, what's gone on in the past and other highly visible trials. And what is so disheartening and gut-kicking is the fact that it's so apparent and obvious. It doesn't get much more clear than a video. These guys walk free. It is a gut kick. We go about our life, we go about our work, we think it's getting better, we think that there is protection, and you see something like this and you realize there isn't. So to ground us in sort of the magnitude of why I bring this up, just to shed light and just to share words. Okay, so we all know what the words are. Here are the stats. 1 in 4 women in their lifetime will be in an abusive relationship. 1 in 4. And 1 in 3 will be sexually assaulted. These stats are gleaned from reporting through social services and through the police. That means who have reported it or who have sought out assistance from social services. The reality there is that many, 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 many women will never call the police or will never seek out social services because they're afraid to. They're embarrassed. They don't want the community to know. They don't want to get their spouse in trouble because that's very dangerous, actually. We are grossly underserved because we don't report. And when we do, we're vilified. And then, people are found not guilty. So today is a vocab lesson. I will share with you what I learned over the course of my studies with women that all of us need to know about. If you're aware of the behaviors and the signs, that's the goal, is to just make you aware of behaviors and signs so that it can, number one, mitigate any effects that it might be having on you, but also you can see it maybe in things that might be happening to somebody you love, your friends, your daughter. It could be anybody because it is anybody. So when I was divorcing in my 40s, my late 40s, my doctor said to me, you should really meet my friend who runs something called the One Love Foundation. And I was like, okay, I was running a marketing agency at the time. And I said, okay, so I met her and I started to sort of peel the onion around the whole concept of relationship abuse. And that was founded by the family of a young woman called Yardley Love, who was a she was just graduating from the University of Virginia, captain of the lacrosse team, gorgeous, had a beautiful boyfriend, also captain of the lacrosse team. He brutally beat her to death one night. And what came about after that was her friends, mostly because they spent the most time around her, her friends reporting behaviors, and they didn't know the words. They didn't know the concept of what a red flag is. They didn't know the concept of stalking. They just thought it was someone who loved someone so dearly that, he'd like pop up wherever she was, or like track her on his phone, or look through her emails, etc. The behavior escalated. That's another word that I remember when I learned the word escalation. That was like mind boggling to me. I was like, wow, yeah, I see that. One Love was all about learning signs around relationship behavior. What is healthy love? What is unhealthy love? To give people the words, which was just such a beautiful thing. And then when I was delving into that, I was just so interested, and I thought, oh my God, these poor women, just in general. My agency was, all about supplying goods and services for women. After I had my second child, I was like, "Oh, geez, no one's talking to me," and I could use some help. So I've always been focused on helping women through the rough patches and just lending a hand, lending an ear. I found an online course. It was the only thing I could find online. There wasn't much around about domestic violence and like learning the words around domestic violence. So again, scary word, which I don't like there. I feel like there has to be a better way to say it, because no woman would say, "Oh, I'm going through domestic violence." It's just like that's not how it's talked about when it's happening. So anyhow, I went to the University of Massachusetts and did a course called Domestic Violence Prevention, and it was taught by a wonderful woman named Eve Bazawa, and she had written a book with a guy called Evan Stark, and it was on something called coercive control. They were sort of the people who coined that term first, and it became a staple, like the Bible of emotional abuse. Was this coercive control book? She and I became friends because you got to talk in a Zoom room with the teacher once a week, and it was me and a bunch of police in this group, because the police had to do it, and I just, like, wanted to do it, and so I was the only one who showed up. So she and I became friends, and we talked all about the history of it and, the ideas that I had around it, and she said, "Oh, you really need more, you should go get more education and really, hone your skills on this and get some creds," and I said, "Let's go." So I got a master's in social work at Columbia. Started right before the pandemic and then finished afterwards, obviously, but did some really wonderful work while I was there. I had the great opportunity to work on the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which I did for over a year as an advocate. And I also worked at the Sanctuary for Families here in Manhattan in something called their Economic Empowerment Group, which actually taught skills to women, to business skills, to earn a living wage, because 99% of women experiencing domestic violence or relationship abuse, 99% are also experiencing financial abuse in that relationship. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. After that, I also simultaneously became an advocate for something called SAVI at Mount Sinai Hospital, which is sexual assault and violence intervention, where you get trained as an advocate, much like what you do at the hotline. And when you're on duty for any of the Mount Sinai hospitals, anyone who comes in for sexual assault or domestic violence, you go there and you're her buffer, basically. And you commune with the police and with the hospital just to make sure she gets everything she needs. It was wonderful. They're such great people. I felt I was thrilled to be part of it. So I mentioned a bunch of these words just now, which is, the domestic violence words, the abusive behavior, escalation, gaslighting, coercive control. When you are in a relationship, a bad relationship, you don't know. You don't know what these words are. You don't exactly know what you're experiencing. You just know that you don't feel good. And and over time, you feel worse and worse and worse. Your confidence erodes. You have trouble making decisions that you used to make really easily. You don't trust them. You don't trust yourself. You're not sure exactly if what you're saying is right, because part of what the emotional abuse is this erosion of your own credibility and your own sense of self. And, one thing that I will say that's super important to remember is it's very easy for people who have not been through this to say, why didn't you just leave? Or I would never let that happen to me, ever. That's just not it's just not true. You'd be surprised. I don't mean to be scary. It can happen to anybody. It really can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't or how little money you have. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter if you are running a company or you're a stay-at-home mom. It doesn't matter. It happens. It just happens because it's slow and over time. When you think about abuse, you think it's physical and pushing and punching and hitting, and it definitely is that, but it's also insidious. It is many things. So I'm going to just tell you what it looks like, right? So domestic violence, IPV, IPV stands for intimate partner violence. I learned that too. What it is it's a pattern of abusive behavior towards an intimate partner in a dating or marital relationship that is used to gain and maintain power and control over that partner. So abuse can be a lot of things. It can be physical, which we know. It can be sexual. It can be emotional, which we've talked a little bit about. It can be psychological, which is similar to emotional, and it can be economic. Just really quickly around the economic piece of it. So that all of these things, like I said, it's about control over this particular person, and all of these facets in their individual ways help the perpetrator of the abuse to have control over you, over the other person. Physical, is really just like controlling ways of where you are, like what you're doing, knowing where you are at all times, calling you a million times. Like, do you really want to go there? Do you really think you should go there? I'm not so sure about you going there. Or just like, no, you can't go there. It can be all that entire spectrum of things you might wanna do, trips you might wanna take, people you might wanna hang out with, a job you might want. Physical, emotional can be that. Physical also we know is like literal physical abuse, which is, horribly dangerous and gets worse, escalates over time. It starts as emotional abuse and it will escalate and turn to physical abuse. That happens and that is scary. The idea of sexual abuse can be anything from hiding your birth control, to making you take birth control, to making you have sex when you don't want to, a variety of different making you do certain things that you don't want to do. What happened in the P. Diddy case is an extreme case of sexual abuse, which is trafficking. And I mean, we've seen cases like this that have happened with the poor woman in France. It happens. That is considered sexual abuse. Economic abuse is pretty awful, when one person controls all the money or makes the other person rely on them for money. So it could mean anything from withholding to cutting off credit cards to putting somebody on an allowance to making you account for or ask for money to not sharing the finances to signing your name on something that you didn't agree to that to get them a line of credit or a credit card to messing up your credit score to refusing to let you work, which is true, showing up at your place of work and causing a scene, which would cause you troubles at work. This is all considered economic abuse, and it happens. Like, some of them are more obvious than others. Some of them are very insidious. The psychological and emotional stuff is very insidious, and that's where the coercive control comes in. Like I said, it's hard to put words on when you're going through it. You don't necessarily know exactly what's happening, but what you do know is that something feels off and you don't feel good and you don't feel yourself. And you find yourself asking questions like, why do I feel so bad? And I have absolutely lost total confidence in myself. And, I don't feel capable of making decisions anymore. And even I feel like my life is out of my hands, it's in somebody else's hands. So those feelings certainly come with the emotional, the physical, and sexual and economic control, because that's like visible things you see. What's not common knowledge, again, is this concept called coercive control. And it's another big word and it does not roll off the tip of your tongue. It's not something that those of us walk around saying like, oh, I'm in a coercive controlling relationship. It doesn't work like that. And you probably won't even say I'm in an abusive relationship. You might just say, oh, wow, I'm in a rough spot. I feel this way, I feel that way. If you're even sharing it with your friends, but you usually do. People usually don't, in my experience with all the work I've done. So the definition of coercive control is an act or a pattern of behaviors, verbal assaults, threats, humiliation, public and private, intimidation, manipulation with the calculated goal of punishing or frightening another person. Here are some warning signs I'm just going to read to you and see if any of this resonates, because that's actually this is what I used to do at the domestic violence hotline. So when someone would call, you wouldn't, come right out and say things. You just talk a lot about, so what's going on, what's happening for you right now. Ask a lot of open-ended questions. That's very social work. Open-ended questions, don't lead the witness. And I would share something called a power and control wheel. And I would start the conversation with somebody, get to know them a little bit, and you can start to sense what's really going on. And the more comfortable she got, the more she'd share. But the more she realized what was going on, then the more she'd share. So you look at the power and control wheel and say, this is just data. This is something that's used as a teaching mechanism for police. Like, for example, when the police get trained in domestic violence or abusive situations, they learn the power and control wheel. You take a look at it and say, okay, does any of this resonate with you? Are you familiar? She would always say, yeah, absolutely. Because you know what? It wasn't just her alone. She wasn't just feeling it by herself, like, "Oh my god, I'm alone in this. I'm in my house. This is happening. That's happening. Is this normal? Am I abnormal for feeling this way?" No, you're not abnormal. This is what happens, and let's talk about it. So here's some of the signs. Google power and control wheel right now while we're talking. You can see it. So warning signs or just red flags: isolating from friends or family, or the slow demeaning of friends, calling them names, stuff like that. Like what I mentioned before. Oh, God, you want to go out with her again? God, she's so loud, or she's so whatever. Monitoring how you spend your time. Where are you? What are you doing? Who are you with? When are you going to be home? Or just, oh, you're going there again? Boy, you really do that a lot. Stuff like that. Tracking what you do online, looking at your texts, your emails, stalking your accounts, commenting on them with the intention of controlling your behavior. Literally putting tracking devices on your car and your phone. That absolutely happens. Repeatedly putting you down, making things your fault. That's a toughie. Like, why do you think I behave this way? Why do you think I behave this way? What are you doing? What do you think you do that makes me behave this way? It's your fault. Embarrassing you or making fun of you in front of your family and friends. Oh, it's just a joke. You're so sensitive. God, that happens a lot. You'll see it now. You'll see it now that I said this. You're going to see it while you're out with your friends. You're going to be like, geez, that's not nice. And I'm sure it doesn't make your friend feel good. Putting up impediments for you to access support, like therapy or groups or medical. That can mean anything, like just dissuading you from going out, or it can mean anything. But again, this is just food for thought. This is data. This is data and facts of stuff that's out there. You can Google all this stuff. Controlling, weighing in as suggestions of everyday aspects of your life, who you're with, where you're going, what you're wearing. Really? Not so sure about that. What do you think? All of it. Make you feel like you're unable to make a decision. That's a big one. And that comes over time, where you really do start to question, am I really making the right decision? Where you used to be able to do that all the time, but now not so much. Use intimidation or threats to gain compliance. That's just when perhaps the anger flares up. Again, that can happen or not happen, but intimidation is a big one. Also making you feel like you're nothing without them, and saying things like, couched in a way of like, no one will ever love you the way I love you. Oh my gosh, look at you. Look at what I put up with here. Oh my gosh. Again, no one's ever going to love you the way I love you. That kind of thing. Calling you repeatedly, or just showing up to make sure you're where you said you would be. The repeated calling, though, that happens. Oh, and blaming you for how they act. I just mentioned that before, but yep, that's a good one. Making you feel like there's no way out of the relationship. So much of that is economic for women. So much of it, because so many of us step out of the working world to raise children. And then you really are dependent on the finances. Aside from just going from maybe like a lifestyle you like and know and friends and all that kind of stuff, to literally just not having access to money. It is very scary. And also when kids are involved, that can be used, absolutely used to make you stay and make you feel like you can't get out of the relationship. Lastly, prevent you from leaving after a fight. Those were all coercive, control-y behaviors. So just think about that. Look at the power and control reel and just educate yourself. That's all. Educate yourself on stuff that happens. Now, a partner to coercive control is emotional abuse, and they're really, like, hand in hand. It's sort of like anxiety and depression. They kinda go together a little bit. Emotional abuse signs are the following, some of the following, and again, I'm reading some of them. You'll find other things if you wanna look. Screaming and shouting, of course, that is, like, degrading and humiliating and hurtful. Emotional outbursts, which are predictable and unpredictable. There's can be certainly a volatility scale that happens, which can be very, very scary and raise your cortisol levels and, make you in fight or flight on a constant level. The other side of that is sulking or refusing to talk or be kind to you until they get something that they want, making you doubt your own sanity, which is gaslighting, basically. I actually have a very vivid memory of the first time I was gaslit, and I was like, "Whoa, whoa, wait a minute." If it comes at a time when you're already eroded a little bit, it's like, "Wow, that's crazy. Huh, I know that's not true, but is it true?" It's just like it was so wild, and then I just, like, walked away from it. I was like, "Okay, alright, I'm gonna just, like, move on from that." It does gaslighting makes you think you're remembering things wrong, misinterpreting things, later making you believe that their version is the true version. It's a manipulation tactic. Threatening that they will destroy something or hurt you, or this is an interesting one, commit suicide. I didn't know about that one. I learned about that one, when I was studying, that is absolutely an abuse tactic, because it pulls on your heartstrings. Because although you are in this situation and in this relationship, it is so emotionally complicated. Emotionally complicated. You are attached, you are trauma bonded. That's a whole other word. And it's really super hard to get out of, for so many reasons. But the committing suicide makes you feel responsible. Threatening to report you to the police, social services, or a mental health team unless you do what they want. That's a big one. Telling you that they're sorry, that it is an abuse, and that it will never happen again. The cycle of power and control. That's the cycle of abuse, is like the abuse happens, they apologize, it gets better, and then it happens again. So it's like this, it's called the cycle of abuse. That too is a thing you can Google. It's fascinating, and something to know about because it's a thing. It's not just happening to you, like, it's a total thing. Telling you that you deserve it or caused it, and why do you think I act this way? Why do you think I did that? What do you do to provoke me? Yeah, no, that's not okay. Threatening to kill or harm you or your children, and that can be in actual words or it can be tacit, just implied threats, which are super scary, and that can, like, work on your headspace too. It escalates. You think that something is just maybe abuse, verbal or emotional, or like, "Oh, I can handle it," and then all of a sudden it starts hitting you on many different fronts because it's really always more than one thing. It just is, and it gets, like, worse over time. And the facts are that the most dangerous time to be in an abusive relationship is when you leave it, because the person who has been causing it, who's been foisting the behavior and abuse, feels like they've lost the power and control, which they have to a degree. However, it can be very dangerous for the woman. I mean, those are times where some pretty serious abuse can happen. So that's something also to be aware of. If somebody's leaving an abusive relationship, I'm not talking about just like getting a divorce. I mean, it's you got to keep your eyes on that. Okay, some ways that this can impact us over time. Again, stuff to be aware of. Coercive control can cause both immediate and long-term harm, and it is said actually to be worse than physical abuse because it's so deeply rooted in emotional trauma. And emotional trauma, as we have talked about here on Inside the Well Space, takes a long time, like a lifetime, to work out. It just does. So this kind of coercive, emotionally abusive situation lives deep, deep, deep inside. It also can cause a pervasive sense of fear and anxiety, PTSD, depression and anxiety, not uncommon at all, not uncommon. So again, if you're feeling any of this stuff, you're right on track. It will get better and you're not alone, but that's absolutely part of it. Erosion of self-esteem and self-worth, which we know, fear and anxiety, which I just said, difficulty with trust in relationships, and that's a real one. Most women to trust again or open up again or want to even get into a relationship again. Certainly physical health problems, that happens. Increased risk of substance abuse, namely alcohol, because whereas for men, Statistically, alcohol is used to like blow off steam and, go have fun. For women, it's more so used as a coping mechanism. And, for therapists out there, I did a class specifically on this. It's something that therapists should really be thinking about when you are talking to a woman about a drinking issue. If she comes to you and shares the fact that she has a drinking issue, investigate what's going on with her in terms of her relationship. Investigate that because she will more sooner and absolutely more readily talk about a concern with alcohol than she will talk about being in an abusive relationship. Absolutely 100%. So I found that fascinating. I had a wonderful professor about that. I mean, you could as a therapist spend your whole like life just focusing on that. When it comes to alcohol as a coping mechanism for us, that too is hard because it can be used against you. If you do decide to leave, that certainly can be used against you that, you have an alcohol issue and God forbid you go to rehab to get yourself better and stronger so that you can leave. That can absolutely be used against you. It can be like a vicious cycle. So something to think about. Just to be again, I'm just saying all of this so we're all aware it's, no one specific person that I worked with or anything. See, this is consistent facts, data, things that are real to be aware of. Okay, social and economic impacts on women, financial dependence and instability because of lack of control of money. That's totally 100% is the real deal because no matter what your circumstances are or where, we are not in the money seat. Generally speaking, we're just not. Isolation, social withdrawal, which is a limiting support of your network. What happens actually mostly with abusive relationships obviously you shrink, you do isolate, you tend to self isolate because it's hard to maintain like chit chat when you are in such bad a bad way. So again, it's something to be aware of because if you feel like a family member or a friend is pulling away or everybody's just like, oh yeah, I haven't seen much of her, she's not around, or gosh, check in with her and be proactive and supportive and stick with her. It's scary to talk about, and she might be being threatened. You don't know. You just don't know. So, and also, okay, so social and economic impacts. Another bullet is difficulty maintaining employment. That can definitely be a thing because some women are forbidden to work. The erosion of personal freedom and autonomy, it undermining your autonomy, coercive control that does that. Difficulty leaving the relationship, psychological manipulation and control tactics make it so difficult, especially when children are involved. I know I've said that before, but I keep saying it. It's like close to impossible. And it all results in mental and physical health problems. Something to note, there is a significant impact on children when they are around an environment or in an environment that has coercive control slash abuse in it. Children witnessing it between parents suffer severe emotional and psychological harm, which can be similar to physical abuse. They tend to have behavior slash emotional issues, anxiety, depression, anger, and other behavioral issues that come out of just witnessing and being around coercive control for a lifetime or for their childhood. It's rough stuff. This is so not about judgment on anyone. It is not a commentary on anyone. It is just education. Sort of like when Holly came on and said heart disease is the number one killer of women. And Chris just came on and was talking all about, androgens that are causing us issues when we lose our energy. This is like factual stuff. So my goal here is to share with you words, definitions, behaviors, so that all it's like just you're awake to it, you know what's going on, and you can just pay attention. You can look at it for your not just, for your friends and see it in relationships, but for your own self. How do I feel? What is going on? What is this behavior I'm experiencing? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is it abusive? That was another thing we used to do on the hotline. We'd look at there's like there was like a thermometer of abuse or just behavior. Do these behaviors fall into healthy, unhealthy, abusive? And you can categorize it like something can be unhealthy but not abusive. So you work on that. The abusive stuff, like, whoa, you have to like recognize and say, "Oh my goodness, I didn't know what was happening to me." It was so hard and sad to talk to the number, and it was all women, of women. Some of them just didn't know, or they grew up with it, or they just didn't want to talk about it, or they just didn't want to report it, or they were just scared. It's so much fear, so much stigma, so much shame that women feel just because it isn't talked about and because there isn't help. And because when you go for help, you know, people are let off and it's right there in the public eye. It's really awful. So another thing to remember is that it is okay to stay too. A lot of people just stay. That's okay. But what you do need to do if you decide to stay is you need to create a safety plan. And that was something that we always did with everybody we spoke with on the hotline was you always made sure before you hung up that you created a safety plan, which was, you had to understand what the situation was. Was it physical? Was it verbal? Was it emotional? What was it? And create the plan accordingly. So if it's physical, it could be, okay, I see that happening. I'm going to move away from the kitchen. I'm going to get myself into the bedroom because the kitchen is where, like, objects are. Little things like that. I'm going to stay out of the bathroom. If talks are starting to escalate, if things are starting to get angry or highly verbal, again, try to move away, try to take it down. These are safety planning tactics that you would work with somebody on, talk to somebody about. Again, these are just little ideas. Created actually two things that are really, I think, are really great. One of them is called an awareness ladder and one of them is called a relationship thermometer, and you can look at them here. And the awareness ladder just takes you on your own path. Where am I in this journey? And where am I headed? How am I headed? I'm happy, I feel good. I'm out of school, I'm got this great job, I'm in a relationship, I have children, and then what happens? And when does it happen? Do I give up my job? How's my relationship doing? Am I feeling okay? Are we aligned on parenting or is that am I being criticized, et cetera, et cetera. It goes, you go down through it and you can start spotting these things. Are my phones being monitored? Are my emails being read? Are my family and friends being criticized? Am I losing interest there now because of it? What's the money situation like? All of these things that I've been sharing with you, you can just sort of see it laid out. I always need visual aids. I'm a visual person. So it's helpful to me to see things written down and just say, like, okay, I get it. I see where I am on that. And then this other thing I did, which I kind of like, is just the relationship thermometer, which is, again, all about you and where you are in learning about your own relationship. I mean, you might have like a great relationship, which is amazing. And there might just be some things you want to work on, which is also terrific. The point of this today is, like I've said, just to share. That's it. Just to share nuggets, definitions of words that we should know. Three things that we're ending on. The three things you need to take with yourself after this. Number one, get educated. Learn about stuff, Google stuff. It's easy, it's out there. Learn the words. Number two, get yourself stronger. Always focus on yourself, focus on, building awareness, education. Always create a support team that's around you so that you're not alone. It's hard when you're in it to feel like you have people who you can talk to, but talking to people is very important. Talking to people and sharing with people is very important. It can be a therapist. It can be a member of the clergy. It can be, a family member, a friend that you feel comfortable with, anybody. You can call the domestic violence hotline and just get some info. That is often the first stop for people is the domestic violence hotline. You just get an idea of what it is. Where am I in this? What is this? Why do I feel bad? It's a great resource. And then, of course, always, think about a safety plan for yourself as you're going through this. Just think about it. Again, it's being prepared and educated and knowing what's going on, and you're going to be absolutely okay. I did actually write a little book on this, a little manual called Under Control. And it's all about coercive control, and it has this great glossary in it of all these words. So I'm gonna get that out just so anybody who wants to see it. Low intensity, it's not a heavy read, but it is just helpful stuff again to know about. So there'll be more of those just on things that we wouldn't necessarily know in sort of like a Cliff Notes, you know, version type of deal, or like what to expect when you're, etc. Whatever it is. Always know you're totally not alone. You are absolutely 100% not crazy. Not. It's all real. It happens. It can absolutely get better. Okay? So we'll see you again soon. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Inside the Well Space. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.